Okay, welcome to review day number 2 for AP European History. Today we're going to look at basically the political stuff that goes on in the 1450 to 1648 time period. We have Koki the dog as our special lecturer today, which is especially appropriate because he is very big on order and law and respect and all those things. Give me 5, Koki.
Give me 5.
Koki.
Give me 5.
Give me 5. There we go. There we go. Yeah. He loves law and order. All right. So let us look at the course description so we can be sure that we are in the right spot. The course description right here. We're going to start topic 1.5, the new monarchies. Now, a quick note about this. On the left-hand side here, you will see illustrative examples. Illustrative examples mean these are good examples of a particular concept or topic. They are not necessarily required to know, but certainly they are helpful examples of a larger picture, big picture sort of thing. Now, if you see a name actually appear in this part, the blue, the course description, Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, you better know what they did for sure because they can be on the test. That's fair game. Okay, so we're going to talk 1.5 through 1.7. Now, in addition, I did put information up on my website for you guys to go through. This is sort of an outline of the things that I'm going to talk about. It is on my website, like I said, sites.google.com/notanap. And this will be placed in the folder that says 2020 AP Euro Review. I will also put this video, which you can find here or on Facebook. Okay, so let's get back to where we were going. All right, so the first topic we are going to talk about is about 1.5. All right, and so basically the topic title was New Monarchies. The main idea here is that in the 1450 to 1648 time period, we see greater political centralization taking place. Monarchs are gaining power over nobles. The feudalism of the Middle Ages is going away, and we're seeing the creation of national monarchies. There are 3 major national monarchies: Spain, France, and England, that we are going to really focus our information on. Now, one of the thinking skills that you can think about is cause and effect. Causation of these new monarchs is a big focus, a big picture. I would study that and go more in depth about looking at causes and effects of the rise of these new monarchies. All right, really what 1.5 wants you to understand is to show how these new monarchies, what actions and tactics they did to create this greater political centralization. The first one that they talk about in the course description is monarchs control religion and morality. And so what we're going to see is that monarchs are going to attempt to establish religious uniformity within their societies. This is going to be particularly important because the Protestant Reformation is going on and we are seeing religious pluralism become an issue and causing issues in society. They mention Henry VIII and Elizabeth I specifically. They were both rulers of England. Henry VIII is going to create the Anglican Church. Elizabeth is going to basically make the Anglican Church the official Church of England and end some decades of religious turmoil that result from that. Other examples of government attempting to control morality or religion would be the Peace of Augsburg, which was signed within the Holy Roman Empire. It basically stated that the leader of each state got to choose the religion that was practiced there. It was seen as a concession to Lutherans, basically guaranteeing their right to worship in states controlled by Lutheran princes only. Secondly, you have the Spanish Inquisition. This is the thing that sticks out the most in my mind. Ferdinand and Isabella doing the Reconquista, getting rid of Jewish and Muslim populations, using the Inquisition to root out those who may have been false conversions to the Roman Catholic Church. And then the Book of Common Prayer was an attempt by, I believe, James I to force the same prayer book on Scotland as well as England, and it resulted in a big kerfuffle. Okay, the second thing that monarchs are going to do is they are going to monopolize the features of government that give them power. Specifically, they are going to monopolize the collection of taxes, military power, the dispensation of justice, and again, like we mentioned earlier, religious belief. Examples of this: the Star Chamber in England was a court created specifically by English monarchs that made nobles go to that particular court to be tried on charges. How things had worked in the Middle Ages is that nobles controlled the justice in their regions, and so other nobles, when they would get in trouble, would often find a very friendly voice in some fellow nobles' court. And so this was an attempt of the monarchy to strip the nobility of their judicial powers. Number two, we see that Ferdinand and Isabella, again, are going to seize military control. They're going to use their monopolization of military power to wage the Reconquista, to kick out any sort of Muslim control that is in the Iberian Peninsula. And number three, the Edict of Nantes in France is going to be done by Henry IV to try to grant some religious protections to the Huguenot minority there. Third thing they do, the monarchs are going to use commercial and professional elites in their emerging bureaucracies that they are creating. Merchants in Italy are going to find increased opportunities to participate in government there. The French kings are going to create nobles of the robe. These are new nobles that are created basically because they serve the king, not the nobles of the sword, who are the old ones who gained their positions through conquest and other things. Number four, secular political theorists are going to emerge. They're going to argue for the usefulness of monarchy. Jean Bodin is going to be a French philosopher, and I have pulled up some quotes by him. This is a good one right here at the bottom. If justice is the end of law, law the work of the prince, and the prince the image of God, then by this reasoning, the law of the prince must be modeled on the law of God, right? Connecting religion to government power is not anything that is unique to Europe at this time. Humans have been doing it for a long, long time, but you can see him making the argument here for monarchy and monarchical power. He also said, the best expedient for preserving the state is never to grant a prerogative of sovereignty to any subject, much less a stranger, for it is a stepping stone to sovereignty. Basically, the king should be the only one that has any power whatsoever, and you should never give any power to any other person, because that will threaten the state, right? Now, another very famous political theorist that we talked about, we read his book, was Machiavelli. Machiavelli is going to say things like, a ruler should be both a lion and a fox. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves. The secular political advice that he's giving to the de' Medici family in Florence. We also see, which is another good one. It is much safer to be feared than loved, because love is preserved by the link of obligation, which owing to the baseness of men is broken at every opportunity for their advantage. But fear preserves you by a dread of punishment, which never fails. Okay, so there's that. Now, last but not least, if we go back to that map that we were looking at right here, I believe, nope, right here, there are some exceptions to the rules where political centralization is increasing. The two most obvious ones are the Holy Roman Empire. There are something like 300 different German states at this particular point in time. Certainly no centralization going on there, and it will not for another 2 centuries. And then the Italian states are carved up into 5 major fragmented kingdoms. On this map, you can see the Papal States, Naples, the Venetian Republic. There are 2 others, what is it? Milan and Sicily, maybe? Anyway, unimportant, decentralized political system there. Okay, so that's 1.5. Now we're going to move on to 1.6. 1.6 is about the age of exploration, right? Okay, so if we go to this map right here, we will see this is a map of exploration and colonization that takes place up to 1700. All right, so what are the things we need to know about this? We'll come back to that later on. Let's go to big screen. All right, so the things you need to know. Number 1, technological improvements are going to allow for exploration to occur. The compass, the astrolabe, the sternpost rudder, the lateen sail, gunpowder weapons, all of these technologies are going to be utilized by Europeans to have the ability to explore, to muscle their way into places in the Americas in particular that maybe they wouldn't have been able to. And the key thing to remember here is that all of these technologies just listed are Asian technologies. So these are things incorporated by Europeans through contact through the Mediterranean. Another big thing with exploration is we see a shift in economic power. Prior to exploration, major trading zones were in the Mediterranean, controlled by Italian city-states, and in the Baltic Sea, where German city-states and Scandinavian countries had power. After exploration, it's going to shift into the Atlantic Ocean, and the Atlantic states are going to become much more powerful, which we will talk about. Number two, why do Europeans want to explore? Europeans want to explore because they want to gain access to luxury items in the Indian Ocean, particularly spices. They also want to get their hands on gold and other sources of wealth, and there is a desire to spread Christianity as well. And the third topic, what are the effects of exploration? Well, exploration is going to have many effects, right? And this is effects not just on European societies, but non-European societies as well. So there's a little WAP stuff here. Number one, we're going to see the growth of empires. The early powerhouse when it comes to exploration are going to be the Spanish, as we will see here. The Spanish are going to colonize huge portions of the Americas. They are in gold there. And so Spain and their New World Empire becomes very powerful in the 16th century. Of course, what we are going to see, though, is that that Spanish Empire is going to decline by the 17th century, and new, more powerful states will take advantage of that. We also are going to see the Portuguese are actually the first European nation to partake in exploration. They sailed down the west coast of Africa, making contact there. When the slave trade starts, it will be the Portuguese who kick that off, although others will later come to dominate that part of the trade. Then the Portuguese are also going to make contact with East Africa, a little bit of India, but most importantly the Spice Islands. But foreshadowing further or later conflict, the Portuguese will lose control of the Spice Islands to the Dutch. And so the Dutch in the Indian Ocean are another big powerhouse global empire. During this time period, the Netherlands experiences what is known as the Golden Age. That's in the 1600s, when their merchant fleet is great and they become very wealthy and powerful from their role in the World Trade Network. Okay, another thing we're going to see from exploration is the development of two economic systems depending on where we're talking about. One, the mercantilistic systems incorporated in their colonies, which is going to regulate who can trade with whom and what can be produced. All the Europeans are going to impose mercantilistic controls on their colonies. They believe that wealth is finite, and they want to ensure that they can get as much wealth as possible. Now, inside European economies, we are going to see greater capitalist practices happening as well. The creation of trading companies in the Indian Ocean by the Dutch and the British, as well as joint stock companies, are going to be an example of how individuals using their own property and capital can come to gain great profits and wealth. And of course, we just talked about how these new commercial and professional elites are also going to find important positions in the new monarchies that are forming. The third effect of exploration and colonization is going to be the spread of Christianity, particularly through the Jesuits. And the fourth one is the subjugation of native peoples in the Americas. They're going to be completely taken over and colonized by European powers, and the beginnings of the slave trade that the Portuguese will start with West Africa that will blossom into a much larger institution and become a huge part of all the colonies in the Americas. All right, so that's it for 1.6. Just to go back and look at the course description, 1.6, right here, Age of Exploration. You can see the illustrative examples. I've covered many of those things. The one person I didn't mention here, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, he is sort of seen as the chief architect of the mercantilistic economic policies. He was the economic advisor to Louis XIV. All right, now we're moving on to our last one, which is 1.7, rivals on the world stage. And we've already really kind of talked about this. The big focus here is how and why exploration is going to affect the relationship of individual European states with one another. And basically, that's a fancy way of saying there's going to be a lot of conflict because they are competing for finite wealth. Remember that mercantilistic worldview says you have to get as much wealth as possible. If you aren't getting it, then your rivals are. And it's a zero-sum game. Whatever you lose, your rivals gain, and vice versa. All right, so Spain becomes this global power in the 16th century. New World silver is a big feature of that power, but they will be eclipsed and replaced by other European powers starting in the 17th century. Portugal was the first nation state to explore, but they're going to be muscled out of many of the most important possessions they have in the Indian Ocean. France, England, and the Netherlands become much more active in exploration in the 17th century, and they are going to be very influential and very powerful, as we already talked about. And so all this competition amongst these European nation states leads to conflict. Examples of conflict that we see: the asiento, which is another way of saying the African slave trade. The Europeans are going to gain slaves by buying captured prisoners of war, and so the slave trade is going to incentivize violence amongst amongst African states. There's also going to be competition of European merchants to control that trade. First, it's the Portuguese, then the Spanish, and then the British will come and dominate the slave trade. Second one, the Treaty of Tordesillas, was the Pope stepping in and stopping the Spanish and Portuguese from going to war over who had rights to access to what routes. And then the 7 Years' War, although not in this time period, a little bit into the next time period, because it doesn't break out until, when is that, 1756. So 100 years into the next time period, but it still comes from the colonization and exploration that happens at this particular point in time. All right, so those are all the topics for today. Let me know if you have any questions. You can email or write a comment. These will be up. You can access them at any time. College Board is also doing live lessons and things like that that you can access. And until tomorrow, when we go over 1.8 through 1.10, I'll talk to you then. See you later.